Welcome to the Postgame. This is the Michael Brooks Show. Welcome, patrons. Welcome new patrons. Welcome to each and every one of esteemed colleagues, comrades, friends, everybody in this experience. We appreciate all of you.
Spies.
No, we don't appreciate them.
We know you're there.
We know you're there. We see you. Vic Vaiana is here. Vic is, Vic, give them your elevator pitch. You're part of the team now.
So, yeah, I'm a freelance video producer. I've been doing explainer-style videos for a bunch of different outlets for a while, and I decided to start doing it for TMBS, Illicit Histories. Yeah.
Very excited.
Yeah, you know, I'm interested in all the global stuff that's going on here. It's a good time to get involved.
Honored to have you. We'll play the ad again for people really excited about it. Got incredible feedback. But first, what we're going to start with is The Debunk with Ben Burgess. He's author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, available for order today. Ben, did you just have a libertarian run-in?
I did. On Wednesday, went into Manhattan to talk to Dave Smith at the Part of the Problem show. He's a comedian and a libertarian podcaster.
I never heard of him.
Yeah, well, you know, that's.
But he kind of does. He kind of does something like sort of like this, maybe. I mean, he's kind of does some commentary, comedy or something.
Yeah. So he's he does something that's like this. It's on YouTube and it's a podcast. I don't know as much about his comedy career, but I think that he was brought in to be like the sidekick for Luis Gomez and Legion of Shanks or whatever that's called.
Okay, I think I know Legion of Skanks. I don't know. I'm not that familiar with it. So anyway, so you were there. You had a nice exchange of ideas with him. I'm not going to lie to you. I did not watch all of it. But seemed like the point is you're willing to get out there and make your points, Ben. Give them an argument. No. You were last seen at some small studio, I'm guessing, if I had to guess, somewhere in Midtown, giving them an argument.
I was, and whatever. I think that I could, some other occasion, give my impressions of that debate, but, give them credit for having it, unlike folks like Stefan Molyneux. Or,
I don't know who that is either.
Yeah.
No, actually, I do know who that guy is, and yeesh. The fact that you're willing to debate him really speaks to your incredible fortitude. But let's deal with, we're going on an opposite track for today's debunk. We're actually dealing with the Democratic leadership that is harming our country and holding us back and engaging in logical fallacies. And I'm going to read you a quote from Nancy Pelosi. I don't know when this, I'm assuming this is a couple of months ago. We don't have the date in front of it. But this is a recent quote.
Yeah, that's right.
This is a quote. It's part of an article from The Hill. And they're speaking of Pelosi. But she noted signature achievement, the ACA. She touted her signature achievement, the ACA, and said she did not want to dismantle it, which moving to the single-payer system would do. Pelosi, now I'm quoting Pelosi, all I want is the goal of every American having access, there's that word, having access to health care, Pelosi said. You don't get there by dismantling the Affordable Care Act. Ben, why is this not an exemplar of logic?
Yeah, so I also want to highlight the title of the article, which is Pelosi on single payer. How are we going to pay for that? Which is actually not as bad as the main argument we're going to focus on, but also pretty weird because I think that, assuming that Nancy Pelosi isn't an idiot, and I think that given her position and her record, I think she's definitely not an idiot.
No, we can all agree that Nancy Pelosi is very much not an idiot. She's actually quite savvy. That's not the point.
Right.
Yeah.
So given that she's quite savvy, she absolutely knows the answer to her rhetorical question, how we're going to pay for it. She knows that even if we had a fairly regressive tax to pay for it, that would still save most people money because the tax burden would be to pay for it would be less than the current combined cost of their taxes and their private health insurance premiums. So clearly that's something that she's saying because it gives her an excuse to be against it, not because she really believes that this is a serious problem, where we could dig up the money to pay for single-payer health care. And something similar seems to be true here. And one of the reasons when I was talking to you a few weeks ago, closer to where this interview came out about possibly doing this on one of the debunks, one of the things we were talking about was that it'd be a nice thing for us to talk about because I can briefly say what's wrong with it as an argument. But then that just raises this further question of, okay, why is she saying this in the first place? And you might have some thoughts about that. But as far as what's wrong with it, it's pretty straightforward, right? So when you say access, if all you really mean is, access to health insurance, then my God, what could give easier access to health insurance than just having the government literally give everybody health insurance like they do in civilized countries? So that doesn't really make sense. And when she's saying, well, the goal of access to affordable health care for everybody isn't going to be achieved by dismantling the ACA, and then Medicare for all would dismantle the ACA. This is a textbook case of equivocation. That she's that dismantle the ACA means something different in the first premise of the argument there, that we're not going to get to the goal of giving everybody health care by dismantling the ACA, than it means in the second premise, that instituted single payer would dismantle the ACA, because in the first premise, dismantle the ACA means go back to what we had before that. Otherwise, that's the only way to read that so that sentence makes any sense at all, that we're not going to get, it's the goal of giving everybody health care by dismantling the ACA, that sure, doing what the Republicans want to do and going back to, when you could discriminate against people for pre-existing conditions, et cetera, that's very bad for the goal of getting everybody health care. But of course, if you read the phrase dismantle the ACA in the sense of do what the Republicans want, that the first premise makes sense, but the second premise doesn't make any sense. Because you say moving a single payer would mean dismantling the ACA. Well, no, moving a single payer wouldn't mean dismantling the ACA in the sense of going back to what we had before. It would mean dismantling the ACA in the sense of making it redundant by going beyond it. So, we don't need all these elaborate patchwork of regulations on the private health insurance industry because we have replaced it with Medicare for all. And so if you read dismantle the ACA in any way that makes the second premise make sense, then the first premise doesn't make sense anymore. So, in other words, it sounds like the conclusion follows for the premises syntactically, but that's only if you're just not paying attention to what the key phrase means. The reason that it's not actually a valid argument is that phrase means something different in the first premise than it does in the second premise. So that's what's wrong with it as an argument. But of course, that's pretty transparent, right? I mean, I think even if you don't have the terminology to know what the name of the fallacy of equivocation is, I think that anybody who kind of sits and thinks about that for a second should realize that there's something very wrong with that argument, which raises this further question. So why is she saying this in the first place, right? If as we agree, she's a very smart person, she's a very savvy operator, she knows perfectly well that instituting single payer wouldn't dismantle the ACA in the sense of going back to what we had before. So what's she trying to get at? What is she trying to signal when she says this?
Well, what she's trying to signal is she's trying to muddy the waters significantly. And what she's trying to do is, I think, actually tap into people's loss aversion, which on some level makes sense. Healthcare is terrifying because we live in a absolute hellscape with regards to capitalist healthcare in this country. And she's trying to cue, I think, just a fear response to, all right, maybe, you're still absolutely in a really untenable, abusive situation with regards to healthcare, but we all remember what it was like. As you said, you had a pre-existing condition, or there wasn't this slight expansion of subsidies, let alone the Medicaid expansion, which actually, of course, is some sort of form of single payer-ish, just means tested. So that's, of course, like the best part of the ACA. So she's going to gloss over that. But I mean, I think that's what she's doing, and it's very clear political speak. She might even be cueing into some type of like trying to associate her anti-progress position with nostalgia for President Obama, which Hillary Clinton did when she was, lying about the Sanders plan and distorting it. But I think, this to me is a kind of great lesson, and we did talk about this, of like, this is why, yes, I agree with you. The left can't just be, attacking or moralizing, but at the same time, it's correct that we approach a lot of these things with a very healthy degree of cynicism, because we're not getting fed an argument here. We're getting fed for some people might be actually pretty effective spin.
Yeah, and I think that one reason, I think actually what this highlights is one of the reasons why we're a worthwhile exercise to look at the argument and break it down and see what's wrong with it. Because sometimes, as in this case, it's not that there's anything particularly interesting wrong with the argument. In fact, if anything, it's that what's wrong with the argument is so obvious when you start to think about it, that it really exposes that the purpose of her saying this isn't exactly to be taken literally, right? That she's doing something else, that the argument is standing in for this spin, this attempt to associate herself with the legacy of Obama and people's nostalgia for Obama in the age of Trump, to just mention something that people are scared about. And once you sort of see that, oh no, there's actually no argument here that's worth taking seriously at all, then you can dig into what's really going on there, which can actually be very clarifying, because what it clarifies is that on the face of it, right, when you first hear her say this, maybe not us, because, we are so used to the sort of contours of these debates that, as soon as you said the word access, everybody in the studio started laughing, which is the right reaction, because we all know that access is what people say to signal that they're not really on board with the only real solution here. They want to save the private industry, and so they're going to muddy the waters. But for people who aren't as savvy about as that, for people who are like good Democrats who maybe even voted for Bernie in 2016, and really do have a lot of our goals, then when they hear Pelosi say something like that, they might think, oh, hey, there's somebody, if they're not really thinking about it too much, they might think, oh, there's somebody who shares my feeling that things were better under Obama. And they share a lot of my moral and political goals. They're as outraged at how hard it is to get health care as I am, but we're just having an argument about how to get there, right? That's when she's talking about the goal of everybody having access, to affordable health care, that makes it sound like we're just having this argument among people who are basically on the same team about how we're all going to get where we want to go together, which is everybody having health care. But then, like, when you realize that taken as an argument, it's just total nonsense, then that can actually help people realize that we're not on the same team, that, that she's on team neoliberalism. Right.
Absolutely. And team neoliberalism is not everybody gets health care. Okay. Ben, appreciate your time as always, brother. The Debunk with Ben Burgess, go order it. Give them an argument, logic for the left. Incredible book from Zero Books. Ben, thanks a million as always.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye.
man. All right. So we're going to do this long belated deep dive into AMLO in a few minutes, and I'll call back into the system, although Skype is being super annoying. But let's do a little bit of a palate cleanser here. It came to our attention a while ago, a very funny and kind of tragic piece of sound or video where Dave Rubin, who is very idea focused, that Ben Shapiro basically was like, yeah, it's cool. Like, we can be on this grind together. We can help build each other's businesses out and, sit around and do far right talking points and blah, blah, blah. But like, dude, I take my stuff seriously. I would not go to your wedding anniversary. And there was a moment where Dave in his Dave seemed to be a little hurt by this. Do you want to see that? And I think why don't we just let's review the tape. Let's go back to the original tape so you can see just how genuinely awkward this was and how, as I say, I think Dave was a little hurt by this. Let's check it out.
But why is it that we're able to do this and most people can't do this?
Because
that's what I'm curious about.
We go home at night and we can have our own lives. That's real, and I think part of friendship, by the way, is that. Like, we go home at night and we just have our own lives.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not married to you, right?
Yeah.
That's like my wife and I have to agree on these issues. You and I don't have to agree on these issues in order for us to share a common space together, and that's really the important thing.
Do you think your wife and you have to agree on all of these issues, or just the sort of more foundational ones?
The foundational ones, but I do think that how you raise your kids.
Or just unlike the poor people not getting medicine part. Yeah, skip a little bit ahead.
David's
I'm
incredible
not sure.
chef, and he would have done it kosher. It's 50-50.
It would have even been a kosher cake, man.
Where building on a bad foundation is a bad move.
So so if you wouldn't bake me a cake, that's okay. And now, because it's 50-50, I can't bake you a cake, which David's incredible chef, and he would have done it kosher, the whole thing, man.
Yeah, now I feel bad.
He would have done it for you.
You got me this close.
Putting that aside, you can't have David's kosher cake now.
Bad,
if we were having an anniversary party, would you come? If I was inviting all the crew that we all know, and we were just an anniversary party, we're just having a party, and I'll even throw in some kosher food for you to make sure you don't have to bring your own.
Honestly, I'd have to think about it. I'd have to think about it in the same way.
So that's interesting to me.
Yeah,
that's interesting to me. All right, so it seemed a little. Our interpretation was that it wasn't just interesting to Dave; it was in fact downright hurtful. Yeah. And this theory might have gotten a little bit more evidence because check out what just recently came to our attention. This exchange this was a couple days ago.
Right? A couple days ago.
All right, check this out.
There are certain issues where the right is not going to move, and frankly, I don't think the right should move. This is one of those, the only issues.
Abortion.
But
can I make a bold prediction?
Sure.
30 years from now, we're going to be sitting here doing this, hopefully in a bigger garage. Maybe.
In Texas, probably.
And you may well have moved me on the abortion issue, and I think I may have moved you on coming to an anniversary party. What do you think?
I think it's a possibility. I'd have to think about that again. The issue, as you know, not to get back into well-trod territory. I think it would be unlikely that you'd move me, but I can never rule out the possibility of being moved on anything, obviously. And again, this comes back down to
not obviously. You literally are a professional propagandist for a certain set of politics. But anyways, go ahead.
I think it would be unlikely that you'd move me, but I can never rule out the possibility of being moved on anything, obviously. And again, this comes back down to, the difference between approving of activity and approving of human beings. If you invited me to a party on Friday night, I also wouldn't go, right? It's just not something I do.
So definitely not a Shabbat anniversary.
A Shabbat anniversary, I think, probably is out, yeah.
A Sunday afternoon.
A Sunday afternoon gay-ish anniversary, or maybe just how about you just have like a freaking barbecue, dude? Does everything have to be?
No, but the party's not going to be gay. It's just we'll have a barbecue.
Okay,
it'll just be a barbecue. Nothing gay is going to happen there.
Well, I wasn't worried it was going to turn into an orgy back there or something. I wasn't worried you were going to bring out the village people or something.
Do you know that gay people have parties just the same?
Pause it. And of course, Ben breaking the ice with a 1961, or I guess I should say, at least give the credit of a 1970s gay joke because that's when the village people were around. But this is pre all of our birds humor here. All right, go ahead.
This is supposed to be the frothy fun conversation.
Yeah,
the end of the show.
Right. This is the hey, what about we end the show where you kind of remind everybody that there's a fundamental unbridgeable gulf in our relationship because you're fundamentally homophobic, and also I basically say that I would. In addition to every other group of people that I've sold out and totally disregard, I'd also completely sell out women, just period, in exchange. If you'll be my friend. I can see a scenario in 50 years or 40 years where I've jeopardized all of women's health, but you are coming to our barbecue.
It's his favorite thing recently to be like, oh gosh, I'm so reluctantly going pro.
Oh yeah, it's like just do it already. You know, choreographing things shouldn't look choreographed. You fucking moron.
Okay,
It'll just be a barbecue. Nothing gay is going to happen there.
When I wasn't worried it was going to turn into an orgy back there or something. Like I wasn't worried you were going to bring out the village people or something.
Do you know that
like
gay people have parties just the same? Well,
wait, what?
sometimes.
What?
Just
No,
the
that's crazy.
same. Yeah.
I was pretty well aware of that, in fact. And in fact, as I've said 1,000 times, happy to go out to dinner. My wife, your husband, happy to go out to dinner and do any of that stuff, as long as it's not like, you know, rah-rah, here's a thing you think is sinful. Join me in celebrating it. Like that's, but again, that applies to a wide variety of sins that, I mean, listen, it's harder on members of my family than anybody else. Like I've said before, I wouldn't attend an intermarriage. Right? Like a Jew marries a non-Jew, I won't attend an intermarriage. So this is exactly the same issue.
Shapiro, they're giving me the signal that you have a hard out. I feel like we just
got a radio show to do in like 5 minutes.
You gotta get the hell out of here. All right, that's Ben Shapiro.
I am literally in a state of awkwardness. I'm not even joking.
Yeah,
that is like genuinely uncomfortable to watch. But I love the take. But what's incredible, like, look, I think Dave from Jamaica always asked me on Discord how long before Dave comes out against gay marriage. But it's just like Ben Shapiro is the principal person in that exchange. Like, it is incredible that Ben Shapiro is like articulating a fundamentalist, reactionary, my view wrong, everything. But he's saying like, I have a value set, and Dave's like, come on, we can even bring out back alley abortions. Can we just be friends?
This is what's amazing about that whole interview is there's a section where they all talk about like they're in this small circle. So Ben really Shapiro, when he talks philosophy, he talks about his philosophy in distinction to Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson.
Oh, sure.
But there's a section, maybe we'll pull it for some maybe Tuesday, but it's Shapiro talking about his philosophy and how like basically we need to get back to Bible stories because the stories we're telling are too complex. It's an argument for fundamentalism on this IDW show. Just an explicit argument for that.
Like an explicit, just like, oh, well, actually, it's too complicated. And if you think of like Genesis, actually makes a lot more sense. And Dave's like, ooh, I never thought of it that way before. I think you're getting me. Let's do that. Can you bring it down? I'm gonna call back into the system. It's down. Okay, so why can't it let me call? All right. So here's what we'll do now. Let's do this long-belated AMLO deep dive, and we'll start by playing this sound. This is, I believe it's Laura Carlson on the Real News Network, sort of intros this, but this is primarily a speech from AMLO where he's early in his presidency saying that they are moving past the neoliberal model. So let's play this clip and then we'll get to it.
Let's listen to a clip of López Obrador on the campaign trail.
Declaramos
Oh, sorry, I need to. You're right. We formally declare, for those who are listening, from the National Palace, the end to neoliberal policy.
Neoliberal politics, actually. Direct translation.
You do it, Vic. So why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Go.
Aparejada esa política o modelo neoliberal.
This neoliberal policy or model.
Con su política económica de pillaje antipopular.
Went hand in hand with the elite and dependent economic policy of pillaging.
Abolidas
Both
las
things
dos
are now
cosas.
abolished.
Ahora nos toca, y esa es la respuesta, edificar lo que sigue.
Yeah. Our response to build what's
Con la
next
conciencia
is now our responsibility.
De que lo que hagamos no solo será
whatever we do will not only be to and serve to renovate our public life, but will also inspire other people's.
Tenemos la responsabilidad de construir
we have the responsibility to construct a
post-neoliberal
proposal.
Una propuesta
a post-neoliberal
neoliberal
proposal.
y de convertirla en un modelo viable de desarrollo económico,
And convert it to a viable economic development
de
model
ordenamiento político y convivencia entre los sectores sociales.
of political order and harmonious
Debemos
coexistence,
demostrar
social coexistence.
que la modernidad
We should show that the modernity
puede
can be
ser
forged from below
forjada desde abajo y sin excluir
and
a
without excluding
nadie,
anyone.
y que el desarrollo no
And
tiene
development
por qué
doesn't have to
ser
be
contrario
contrary
a la
to social
justicia
justice.
social.
Okay, so guys, I'm going to open it up. There's a lot to hit here, and I'll start with you, Vic. What is your read on?
So yeah, I mean, when he was coming in, and throughout his campaign, he had a lot of anti-corruption rhetoric, which, as we saw in Brazil or in here, it's kind of can be a red flag. But since he's been in office, he's really taken like a systemic approach rather than going after, people in the last administration or specific officials. He's been like with the state oil company, he's shut down a lot of the pipelines, specifically to go after and inspect like this systemic theft within the potentially within the company of oil out of the pipelines, so things like that. He's sort of taking this systemic approach rather than like trying to do this whack-a-mole or, making political enemies out of people. So I think coming in, it was sort of uncertain which way he was going to go. And so he's definitely has this like as we saw in that clip too, he sees the corrupt system as like neoliberalism itself. It's not
right. So when he talks about corruption, he's connecting it to these broader systems, and that's always the tell. Right wing anti-corruption politics is authoritarian, and it is always fixated on specific personalities and symptoms and then weaponized against the left. And of course, Brazil is the most extreme example of that. A left perspective on corruption would take these corruption cases, including like the petty corruption of politics, but connect it to systems of capital and capital accumulation. And he's also connected the savings from corruption on redistribution, which is another distinction. Chris?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to cover. I mean, there's been a lot of changes in Mexico even in the past few months. But, we talked, last week during the Gem about what's been going on specifically in the border regions, where one, AMLO increasing the minimum wage there was massive. Two,
doubling it.
Yeah, doubling it. And basically what it did is also pushed up people who were above the minimum wage. They started demanding, that was the 2032 movement that, is still ongoing. And then not breaking the strikes, which in Mexican that's politics huge. And history is massive. So that's been something that's been very significant. But we've talked about that a little bit, so I just want to talk about something that people do bring up to me a lot when I talk about
just
AMLO.
1 second.
Yeah.
Matt, do you mind bringing us those coffees? Thank you so much. All right, go ahead.
Is the question of police militarization.
Yeah.
And that goes into a lot of the questions about what we're talking about with corruption. And I don't have a strong position here or there, but to understand what they mean when they're talking about militarizing the police in Mexico, you have to understand how a lot of these local police precincts were working, where they were predominantly fiefdoms of a few small people, and they were very corrupt, and they were involved with the drug trade. So it's important to not think about it in like the American context, for example, whereas like if Trump were to institute a national police, obviously we would have a very different reaction to what they're doing there. So they're actually trying to pull back that kind of military people on the street, basically with guns, right, from these kind of smaller groups and try to have it something that's a little bit more systemic. Now, of course, it doesn't necessarily that it's going to be good one way or the other, but it's a very different context than in the United States. It's a different context.
Yeah, that's a really important distinction. And then I think, the other kind of big things that I've seen emerging are that, he hasn't been as adversarial to Trump as people would want. And, and maybe this is just where my sort of default setting of a certain type of realism kicks in, which is that you got to start judging these things on very specific merits. So he opposed the U.S. push for a regime change and a coup in Venezuela. Like that is the type of metric of when a Mexican president with the asymmetry of that relationship and a dangerous belligerent bigot in the White House and a dangerous U.S. national security state trying to push a coup in Latin America, and he says, no, we want a diplomatic process, that's where it actually matters. I think on the issues of refugees and migrants, that's much harder. And I think if we're being honest, I think we're all actually looking to shape an actual viable strategy frankly, I think if you really get into it, not just to reduce the Trump war and terrorism of immigrant communities, but actually more broadly stuff going back to the 1990s. I mean, if you actually look at some of the detention policies on refugees and really vicious policies that got, I mean, here's a good pop culture example. I don't know if many people remember Shine, right? The rapper. So Shine, he wasn't as good as Biggie, let's be honest, but he sounded like Biggie.
He was Bad Boy, right?
He was definitely Bad Boy. And there was the shooting at this club with J-Lo and Puffy. And Shine took the rap for it. There's even a Nas lyric where he says, "I don't like how Diddy did Shine." Bottom line, and again, it was some type of, nobody was seriously hurt. But it was, whatever. A gun was discharged. So I'm not saying it wasn't like an actual crime. And it's not even clear whether or not Shine was really responsible, but he got the blame. He took he took the fall. He was born, I think he's Guyanese. Banned. He's out of the country. Cannot get his citizenship back. This is a guy who grew up in Brooklyn, who started a prominent career in the United States in his 20s. Ironically, total side tangent, he primarily resides in Israel now and has become an Orthodox Jew. So there is a lot. It's a highly New York story from Guyana to Israel to Diddy. But the bill that he was deported on was a legislation that was signed under Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
So this war on people from other countries is, again, if you draw a false equivalency with Trump, it's wrong. Period, full stop. He's accelerated and expanded the boundaries of it radically, and it's an overt white supremacy, and it's a distinct, ruthless threat without question. However, the broader structure of how you deal with this goes beyond it, and it's going to be very hard for a Mexican head of state because, as plenty of people have pointed out, including Daniel Denver, part of the acceleration of the war on immigration from Mexico correlates with the signing of NAFTA. And we open up borders for capital and opportunities to exploit labor in Mexico, and then have this much more policed, brutal policies on immigration coming from south of the border. So AMLO has to take all of that on. And then the other disturbing thing is at times there's going to be symmetries between what the left in Mexico wants in terms of labor and wages and what some of the worst white nationalists in the Trump administration want. Because some of the worst white nationalists in the Trump administration are going to be amenable to some progress in Mexico because that will lessen immigration, essentially. And that's another very weird, disturbing symmetry in this conversation.
I think just talking about his relationship with Trump, though, it's also important to recognize that it was incredibly brave and continues to be brave for him to refuse to recognize Guaido.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Yeah.
Huge. Foundational.
Massive. So
well,
it's
those
not
are the ones that those are the basic tests. Some people want there to be a fight about every single thing and not recognize certain things are hard to figure out, but there it is. The president of Mexico said no.
Well, and another huge thing that they've conflicted about is that, AMLO wants a Marshall Plan for Central America to, decrease immigration. And, we just cut foreign aid to those countries. So it's like that's a whole nother conflict there that people are not really bringing up. And freedom of movement is vital, but the same token, we've ravaged these countries where people are fleeing. So we owe them a debt, and Mexico is willing to, wants to kind of go half in on it. And we just pulled a ton of aid.
Absolutely. And that's a truly visionary policy. So AMLO, I would say, look, his poll numbers are really high.
Yeah.
I think areas where, I think the strike thing is a great example. There isn't necessarily official support for it, but clearly this is the type of thing that the possibilities get opened up when you have an administration in power. And that is the signal. I mean, this is how this stuff works. That's the signal to the left, to the grassroots, to the base, to push and push and push. And yes, I think the policing questions are a big question mark. I think there's frustrations in certain areas, but I think you'd have to say, especially in the context of today's world, you have a progressive leader running Mexico who's followed through on key promises over the first 100 days and has huge popularity.
Yeah. And a country that probably is one of the most ravaged from neoliberalism. I know out of OECD countries, it has the worst outcomes for working people in general. I mean, it's a country that very much the kind of trends that we're trying to reverse it's been at the forefront of those. So having a government that's not only willing to, but is also, as we were saying, with the public support that he has, is like strong enough to push back against these. That could really rewrite a lot of the way that even the United States economy participates in Latin America.
Totally.
Definitely.
And he's got tons of institutions to rebuild as well. Like all that, has been decimated.
All right, so there's our. We'll check back in on AMLO soon. You're calling from a 678 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Some water.
678. Are you there? Or are you taking a bath?
Oh, hey. Sorry about that. Hey, it's DJ from Gwinnett. Just calling just to say I'm a first-time caller, long-time listener.
Thank you.
Yeah, really enjoy the show. But
appreciate it.
One topic that I really wanted to touch on was just sort of like the lack of discourse when it comes to good urban planning.
Okay.
I live in Gwinnett County, Georgia. We just had a referendum to extend MARTA over to our county. Now, county commissioners pushed it over the vote from November, where we could have had a massive turnout, over into March. And the turnout was it was about 17%. The whole key issue in terms of that is just pretty much the stigma that mass transit gets. That it brings crime, undesirables, and Gwinnett is sort of suffering.
So they use racism
when it
to
comes
kill
to
mass transit proposals? That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they use race. Yeah. Well, at least anti-MARTA campaigns. But pretty much what I'm saying is, why do you think that urban planning isn't really getting talked about enough on the left? Where I feel like we should be talking about that, especially when it comes to aspects of the Green New Deal. If you really want a green economy, why not make cities more walkable? Why not make transit more accessible?
There was one really good piece in the Jacobin that had, and I'm forgetting the name of it, but it was really great because it was all about how the Green New Deal can't just be about efficiencies, and it has to be the cities should be places that are filled with parks and greenery and walking and opportunities for social interaction, rest and leisure, and that life, that's real. In a positive sense, that's actual life politics. I mean, the reason I want everybody else to jump in. I don't cover it because I need to know more about it. So you have resources to send me. I will look at them, and then everybody will jump in. Thanks for the call, man. Appreciate it.
There's a podcast called The War on Cars, at The War on Cars, if you want to find it on Twitter. I think
cars are bad.
I would agree. We are so far behind on having this conversation. I mean, cars or lawns, all sorts of these things, we just can't take into the farther into the century. I think it's developing. I think it's coming late, but it is there. You can, you are noticing people bring that up more and more. At least I'm seeing it.
I think that's I don't know. I mean, at least on the academic side of the left, urban planning has actually been something that people are very fascinated on. There's a lot of resources, incredible books. I mean, you can even just go on Verso. They have a whole section on urban planning and architecture. I mean, so the theory.
Don't forget that David Harvey's geographer.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
it's like
the major. Yeah.
The theories there. The tension I think that the caller is sort of hitting at is that within popular movement, it's been difficult to build. Around that, and I think one is because we focus a lot on national politics. Two, just most city governments have just been completely decimated politically, where they're just very much run by real estate interests. So we're not having grassroots campaigns there. They are developing, and there's people who do incredible work around that. So that's that's where you're going to see people talking about it more. But urban planning, I mean, I think starting to articulate the right to a city, to try to reclaim these spaces from the few people who have been able to dictate them. I mean, New York City, for me, as somebody who's moved here, has been very fascinating to live in because you see, I was walking around in Lower East Side yesterday, and you see these grand public libraries that were built, in the 20s and 30s to basically, to educate immigrant populations for free, right? Yeah. And then you look up and you see all the new development that's basically going on right now, and it's to create, for an international audience, but investment opportunities in real estate in New York City in the Hudson Yards, and you see that there's been a complete disjuncture between those two histories. And it's something that we absolutely need to reclaim to be able to have spaces that are livable, because it's not just cities like New York. My home city of Austin, Texas is becoming very unaffordable and very unlivable because of these same forces. So I think taking that rhetoric on is something that we definitely have to be doing.
100%. You're calling from a 479 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Sorry, you there?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. This is Eric calling from Arkansas.
Hey, Eric. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to say I'm also a first-time caller and a new patron.
Oh, thank you, Eric. Welcome aboard, my friends.
Yeah. I just want to say I love all of you guys. Oh, appreciate it.
Shabbat shalom.
And I appreciate it anytime I hear you guys talk about Arkansas, because the health system here, the health situation has not been good lately.
Yeah,
but of course we had the recent.
It's horrible.
I'm sorry, I'm just kind of nervous.
No worries.
We had the recent sort of court ruling about Medicaid in Arkansas works that really sort of reduced the burden for people like myself and workers around. I've recently been able to also negotiate getting off of I can't think right now.
It's totally fine, man. You want us to you want to go? Call in again soon, please. And please don't be nervous.
No. Well, anyway.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to say I stand with Ilhan.
Yes.
And there are people in Arkansas that are on our side.
Word.
Awesome.
And I just wanted to plug one thing. Mm-hmm. It's called Lucy's Place. It's an LGBT organization that helps to serve homeless people in Central Arkansas.
Oh, awesome. Do we have a link for it?
And if anyone can check it out, because, I mean, if it's tough for trans people in blue states, just think how tough it is for people in red states.
Word.
So it's called Lucy's Place, LuciesPlace.org, if anyone can check it out.
And your name was Eric?
Uh-huh. I'm not affiliated with them, just so you know. But
no, I believe you.
To give them a shout out.
All right. Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it.
Left is best.
Left is best.
Oh, and please, one more thing.
Yes.
Do more Left Bush. Left Bush.
People like
Funniest
that.
Thing I've ever heard.
We did that.
That was recent.
So,
yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Thanks so much. It's kind of like, Bernie's a millionaire? Really? What was it? I forgot. It was just like, oh, really? Bernie's a millionaire? Yeah, that's a serious critique. Why don't you moralize politics a little bit more?
Oh, yeah, never forget 9/11. We're sending how much money to...
Yeah, we're spending how much to the Saudis?
How much missiles we sending over there?
How much? No, I didn't realize never forget 9/11 meant fund the Saudis. That stupid laugh. I actually love George W. Bush. He's so fucking. He was so cool. He was so man. If he did not, I think I do remember saying that. If he was not who he was, he'd be awesome.
I was hoping that putting Henry Kissinger on the 9/11 Commission would give you one more chance to take a crack at him and knock him off his pedestal.
I was like, I don't understand. Guy quits the freaking commission.
I team up for
you. He won't even reveal his business interests in China and the Middle East. He still can't do anything besides some fucking dumb book by some British guys on hardball all the time. It's pathetic. All right, speaking of which, we're going to do our credit where credit is due segment. And then we'll get to our new segment we're inaugurating, which is just simply called Bad. And we'll explain that in a minute. So Tulsi Gabbard has come out with a video in support of Ilhan Omar and a condemnation of Donald Trump. Look, bluntly, I would have liked a little bit more time on Ilhan, but I don't want to be petty here. The bottom line is that she's standing in solidarity with Ilhan Omar. Bernie Sanders has been clear and unequivocal. Elizabeth Warren has been clear and unequivocal. While the leadership of the Democratic Party continues to absolutely fail in this basic moral test of a woman who's a leader and a woman who is facing incitement from everybody from the moron fucking president on down. So Tulsi Gabbard came out. This is clear. This is unequivocal. By the way, I also see a real improvement here in even how she's framing understanding terrorism. Yeah. So absolute total props to Tulsi Gabbard for this. Let's play this video.
Representative Omar's concern is legitimate. It is wrong for the president to try to foment fear of an entire group of people based on their religion, in this case, Islam, because of the actions of a handful of people who claim to be of that religion. If a Christian or a Hindu does something that's bad, it doesn't mean that all Christians or Hindus are bad. If a Muslim does something bad, it doesn't mean that all Muslims are bad. To conclude otherwise is religious bigotry, and it must be condemned. Now, the point that Congresswoman Omar was making is that she and other Muslims around the country have felt under siege because of bigotry against all Muslims, based on the actions of a few who claim to be Muslim. This is not a difficult concept to grasp.
Right.
I'm sure that President Trump understands this, which makes his statements even worse. He is fomenting bigotry towards all Muslims for selfish political purposes.
I got to tell you, too, I made a mistake in setting that up because I said I would have liked to see more clarity on Ilhan. I'm thinking of another video, actually. So that was great. Let me just, that was excellent. I have nothing to add to that, but let me just read the top. She writes, Trump is shamelessly trying to foment religious bigotry against hashtag Ilhan Omar and all Muslims based on the horrendous actions of a few individuals claiming to be Muslim. This is the very definition of religious bigotry. Trump is fermenting it for political gain. Dangerous and sad. 100% right. Perfectly done. I will say, I hope that this migrates to her position on the terminology of Islamic terrorism, but that is excellent. And I always want to give credit where credit is due. So absolute credit to Tulsi Gabbard for that. That was impeccable. Now, let's go to the absolute opposite end of impeccability and check out this absolutely disgusting action by Nancy Pelosi. And this will be the inauguration of our new segment. Wait, pause it. I know you're jumping the gun there, Matt. This is a new segment we're just calling Bad.
But it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
Excuse me. I thought you said it was bad. It sounds like the segment is not good.
Nancy Pelosi, not good.
Nancy Pelosi, not good. All right, do you want to try to see if we have bad? Let's see.
I'll play bad when we wrap the segment up.
Which one?
I'll play bad when we wrap the segment up.
Okay. So, a man was arrested a couple of days ago with plans to assassinate Ilhan Omar. Donald Trump has tweeted a video interspersing footage of celebrations of 9/11 with a speech by Ilhan Omar. The entire right-wing media political apparatus is targeting her in the most, let's go with the descending orders here of extravagant dishonesty. You can go back to 2012, well before she was even in public life, and you could say, okay, that was a tweet that she should have worded differently. Then we have something 2 months ago where it's like, okay, maybe she could frame things a little bit better. Sure, but that's not the point, and she hit all of the right marks and reversed herself in the small ways that she could improve herself. And now we're at the point with this some people did 9/11 thing where we are just purely and totally and absolutely not even 98-2. This is 100% to 0, manufacturing something out of nothing to terrorize the most admirable, amazing, impressive member of Congress and exploit all of the erogenous zones of Republican paranoia. And I'm sorry to be so disgusting, but that is exactly what it is. And of course, this parallels the demeaning and weaponization of anti-Semitism in the United Kingdom to target Jeremy Corbyn. Now, again, in a sane political environment, we could absolutely identify, and Jean Bajlan and I did do a primer on anti-Semitism in labor. And one of the big upshots, by the way, was that in the United Kingdom, great deal more issues with anti-Semitism with regards to the Tory party in terms of reality, not to mention UKIP and other far-right forces. But yes, Jeremy Corbyn has made a few slip-ups. Then there's also the fact that he correctly opposes the occupation and the siege on Gaza. That's right policy. That's criticism of abusive state, not anti-Semitism. And then there's just the broader reality that They've been trying to terrorize this guy out of politics because he supports actual redistribution. And anti-Semitism is the only thing that the tabloid press and the right and the Blairites have found that have had any traction. Everything else has actually bounced off of him. And Nancy Pelosi uses this as an opportunity to meet with a group of MPs who have left the Labor Party. They're part of this ridiculous new Blairite independent formation. And this is Nancy Pelosi's tweet from today. Important discussion with former Labor MPs Mike Gapps, Chris Leslie, and Ian Austin to hear their perspective on Brexit, why they left the Labor Party, and the importance of standing unequivocally against anti-Semitism wherever it is found. This is what they call in the biz a dog whistle. At the very same time that Ilhan Omar is being terrorized by the far right in this country and across media, distorted and targeted, Nancy Pelosi is amplifying people from a totally different political context who are playing their own profoundly cynical, deluded game about anti-Semitism to forward the type of awful, trash, centrist corporate politics that Nancy Pelosi often practices herself. It's disgusting, and it's either not good or bad. Let's try the other one. Let's see, Matt. Oh, man, that was such a good transition.
No good, really bad for you.
All right, let's play both of them and decide which one. Let's do a little around the horn here on which one's better.
No good, really bad for you. But it looks like it could be something that will be not good. Believe me, not good.
Damn, give me one more time.
I'll shorten the second one.
All right.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
And the other one?
No good, really bad for you.
All right, I'm voting for not good, really bad for you.
Yeah,
I love both of them. Is there a consensus on that?
I'm there too.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, I just think that I like the mix-up. So, Nancy Pelosi, hit it.
No good, really bad for you.
Thank you.
Not good. Believe me, not good.
You're calling from an 818 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hello, Michael. This is Dave Rubin from Jamaica.
Oh my God, that's a Dave from Jamaica, killing it. Do we have Dave's
I just
drop?
come here to talk about some ideas, if you don't mind.
Yes.
So, you said that I wouldn't debate Sam Cedar, and yeah, but as you can see, I'm working with Ben Shapiro to develop a friendship. So I think maybe eventually I think I might have to divorce my husband. So I can be friends with Ben Shapiro. It's the same.
Have you been listening to Have you been listening to old Buju, Jamaican Dave?
I think Buju Banton has, he has some good points, so more fire. I'm just saying.
Why is it so I'm married and you say burn a Batiman? Why is it we can have this dialogue and other people can't?
More fire. You got to, boom bye bye. You just think it has to happen.
Oh my God, Dave from Jamaica, that was brilliant. What else do you have on your mind? That was great. Very good. Applause.
Yeah, well, I'll go back to the normal mode. So, looks like I'm breaking up. Oh, I'm still here. Oh, good. So, yeah, I just wanted to make it a fun call today. It's a bit serious and stuff. So I wanted to give some people some smiles and stuff. And
beautiful.
Also, Matt, love the work you're doing with Literary Hangover.
Oh, thank you.
Shouts to Literary Hangover. Apparently, there was a Griscom Leck.
And of course, shout outs to the Discord, always educating me as well as you guys. So keep it up, guys. See you later.
Thanks, Dave. Awesome. Let's keep going with the
calls.
calls.
Very good. That's Jamaica's best Dave Rubin impression.
That was absolutely. I would be very confidently predict that is Jamaica's best Dave Rubin impression. And by the way, I Buju is out of prison, and I am all about people reinventing themselves and moving forward.
Hasn't he apologized? Or?
Of course.
Yeah.
He doesn't do that song anymore. He's awesome. Buju's amazing. And he got 7 years in prison for bullshit. which is also another relevant part of the fucking another insane entrapment case. We need to talk about that someday. You're calling from a 760 area code. Who are you? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Michael, it's Kentucky Fried Comrade. Don't know how I'm going to follow up Dave Rubin from Jamaica, though.
No, that's pretty hard. I almost feel bad taking any other calls. That was pretty impressive.
Best call so far.
Yes.
Just wanted to, so you were talking about Nancy Pelosi meeting with the independent group.
Yep.
And one of the people in there, let me double check the name so I don't mess it up, was Ian Austin, who from the CBS Discord community had pointed out today is kind of famous in the independent group for saying that one of Jeremy Corbyn's biggest failures was letting Eastern Europeans and Polish people into Britain, and that was his big concern.
Hey, so sounds like he's interested in ideas.
Yeah, no, he's just open. He wants an open exchange of ideas. But the other thing I wanted to say real quick is really excited to come see you guys in Los Angeles.
Hell yeah!
Can't wait to come to the live show. I am gonna try through some machinations to get you to try carne asada fries. It's a thing. It's gonna happen. But,
I don't think you're gonna need to try that hard, bro. I'm gonna try. I'm sounds great. I'm there. That does not seem like it needs that much strategy. I'm down. I'm with it. I'm telling you guys, this show is going to be really good. We're doing these mapping these. The show is. I think we did a great job at the Bell House, but now we're seasoned.
Oh no, seriously. I mean, we were playing it out. We were ready for everything. I feel like this time.
Yeah, and seeing you guys at the Brooklyn show in the Bell House was a blast. Meeting everybody and getting to connect with other people in the TMBS community. Some I've joked around with for months and had fun with. Really, it's a lot of fun, and if you're kind of on the fence about going or think you might want to go, but not sure if you want to do it, I really suggest going because as great as you are, Michael, meeting everybody else of like minds is so important.
We're just a conduit, man. We're all peers.
Have a good show,
just
guys.
Doing different
Love
things.
you. Left is best.
Love you too. Left is best. All right. Thanks, guys. That's we have more to do, but that will do for the calls. That was kind of perfect in terms of we got to every call that was online. Okay, let's take a few Discord questions. I completely agree, Michael McAllister. I completely agree that our broader project should be to break up predatory industries. If your argument is that we should just skip UBI and break industries up, it will take global effort. If Richard Wolff were to debate anyone, I guess take that first. What he's saying, I think you're right. I mean,
you need to grease the wheels with UBI to be able to take.
Look, if UBI was legitimately introduced as an add-on to pre-existing programs or expanded programs, I'm totally cool with it.
Right.
In fact, ironically, one of the biggest successful, but again connected with many other programs, Lula did a form of UBI. Lula did Boss Familia program, which was a cash transfer, and all they had to do.
But that it wasn't universal, was it? It was
no, it was targeted. It was not universal. It was targeted at the poor, and the only conditions were you had to take your kids to the doctor and basically have them be sent to school. That was it. There was no other condition on it, and it was in the context of a whole bunch of other mass redistributive policies that the Workers' Party put in place. So again, the critique is not of UBI. It's just per se. It's just that UBI is a Trojan horse for cuts in other programs, and I am never going to support that.
Yeah, and look, don't get me wrong. Working class people, poor people, is exactly the example that Michael's bringing up. But cash transfer to certain people can be very beneficial. But as we talked about on Tuesday, there is a distinct history of right-wingers wanting to use this as a way to privatize as much of the world as possible, rather than to decommodify as much of the world as possible.
Or consolidate, as Andrew Yang is saying.
Yeah, exactly. To make more efficient. Yeah. And, so there's definitely a possibility for that. As to the question of if we start to break up major corporations, major industries, well, I think we got to think about them, so specifically in healthcare, insurance, people who were processing claims, yeah, those are jobs that will not be necessary anymore.
Those are the Graeber bullshit jobs.
Yeah, and it's like, and that's probably
Yeah.
a good thing. I think having a jobs guarantee is actually a better situation than having the right to a job, so that the federal government provides jobs for anyone who wants to work, will provide work for them. That's something that I think is something that I think actually is a lot more feasible politically. And also I think could do a lot more good than necessarily having to take like a Yang style argument that like, oh, because there's going to be mass unemployment, we're going to have a UBI, because most people would rather participate in their community. And that's one thing that we don't talk about a lot when we're talking about unemployment, right? Because we're talking about people, especially people who are unemployed, who are being abused by this system. But it's not just that, you know, they can't produce, is that you lose touch with a lot of the community because you're not participating in social life. You become very alienated. Most people want to participate, and we could find ways to do that aren't necessarily about, you know, commodity production, but are actually creating a better community and a better society.
That's a really good point, because, you know, one of the things that people got freaked out about in one of the Andrew Yang videos, where I noted the amazing New Deal programs of just like putting people to work in all these like incredible ways. I mean, it really is one of the most. You should read Harvey K's explanation of that, and how like. And even in the 90s, Jeremy Rifkin was one of the first people. He wrote a book called The End of Work, which anticipated this stuff by decades. And in fact, at the time, he was laughed at by people like Paul Krugman, and now it's kind of more mainstream, this concern about robots replacing jobs. But his whole thing was, you need to have a mass redistributive effort to just redirect human talent into solving huge social problems. So the idea was like, well, why doesn't government could pay people to like build bridges, to make art, to be mentors, to educate people. And Yang, you know, again, people were all freaked out because I was, you know, being unfair, which is a common thing in this conversation with him. And I looked it up, and it's true. He does say like, oh no, UBI would generate like a lot of local economic activity, and it would give people more agency. And that's great. And maybe he does have nice intentions with it. And again, I'm not even, if you wanted to do this mass government interventions and give people $1,000 a month, I certainly am never going to say no to $1,000 a month. But the frame of, instead of having a mass collective effort that's about democracy and community versus just like a bunch of new small business schemes, it's obvious which one is more durable and will more actually address our problems and start to create the space for people to demonstrate that there's a huge amount of value and importance outside of markets. And that's and that I think actually, again, people just need to get comfortable that like, it's just a political difference. You know, I'm not interested in humane capitalism or perpetuating capitalism. I think we need to really graduate from this system. It's exhausted its usefulness.
Exactly, and paying somebody, and the reason that the UBI, especially the one that Yang's proposing, is, when we say right wing, I mean that in the sense that it's capitalist, because it's trying to rectify the problem that capitalism creates, which is mass inequality, people being unable to afford basic goods. Literally, that's not even something that's outside of like, that's not just like me being like a, you know, like a Marxist per se. You need to have people who are going to come and replace people who you fire. So you always need to have an unemployed population, right? So that's built into capitalism.
It's called the surplus surplus population, surplus labor population.
So what Yang is trying to do is they're trying to basically mediate the worst and most aggressive aspects of capitalism by giving somebody $1,000 a month without addressing the fact that, wait, why do we want to live in a society where a few companies are running everything? You know, why do we why instead of, you know, he's talking about paying people $1,000 so that we can maintain a system that is putting people out of work and putting people in precarity.
Right, and that's like a basic thing. Like, why doesn't, you know, a Marxist response to, okay, if, and again, this is someone where Tucker Carlson gets mileage off of this. He argued with Ben Shapiro. He said in some argument, Ben Shapiro, I won't play it because I'm not going to give Tucker Carlson props.
Under no circumstances do you have to hand it to him.
Yeah, exactly, because fuck him. But no, he was correct in this specific argument, I'll say in the postgame. And he made the obvious anti-market nutcase point, which is like, look, if it's actually true that like we're going to lose 20 million trucking jobs, my answer is we stop and regulate that out of happening, because that has an enormous social cost. So you just don't do it. There's no magical reason why you just let it happen. Now, if your answer to that, the smart answer is, well, these companies are really control the process and that will be really hard to do, and so you can ameliorate it with UBI, fair enough. But I don't think you can keep ameliorating these problems. You have to fundamentally confront power. And I also think that's another difference between, look, I don't feel a need to make like a big show of like how radical I am, but like another fundamental difference, like I think Bernie Sanders is great. I support Bernie Sanders 100% because I do think it will make a big difference in people's lives. But I see that it's like AMLO. It's like the same thing. It's the launching point of something better. I think that I don't picture Bernie, say Bernie wins and wins his agenda. First of all, life is way better for most people, 100%. But I don't think that's when people are like, oh, great. Well, I've got health care.
That's the time to roll up your sleeves.
That's when it's like, oh, shit. What could we really do here to take control of our lives and create a radically more democratized society that is the fulfillment of the Enlightenment project, that people shouldn't just be liberated from political and religious monarchies, but economic monarchies as well. And, so that's the other difference too, is like I notice when people argue from a Yang perspective, they are usually arguing, and again, we won't even clip this because I already know there'll be a million like, no, he talks about abundance. But it's like, no, there's a difference between ameliorating measures versus measures that not only ameliorate, but actually open the possibility that we could do a lot better for ourselves as a species, frankly. And that's the doorway. That's what Sanders is offering. And that's the distinction. So, whatever, but I'll talk to Professor Wolf about UBI. I don't think we're like anti-UBI. We're just concerned when it's a Trojan horse.
Yeah, like if Yang came out with a UBI that said nothing about, like consolidating disability benefits, and if it was just like a plus $1,000 for everybody, no matter what programs you are, and we wouldn't be having this reaction.
No, it'd be cool. Good for him. Banerjee, what are your thoughts on Meretz merging with the Labor Party? I mean, they need to. There's basically no space left in Israeli politics for what they represent. But it would be healthy if Israel had an actual center left. There's no doubt about it. I just don't know if that's possible right now. I mean, Israel is like an extremely far-right country. And even the centrist parties that overperformed are right-wing parties by any measure, including even on a lot of domestic issues. Like they're really, it's a right-wing political atmosphere. How does the left in South America counter the rise of the right, especially with new tactics that the right is using now? Wow, got no answers for our comrades.
I mean, I think that's the like the struggle of history. I mean, I think when Haddad was here and speaking with Varoufakis in New York, they had a talk together, and I thought it was very interesting to hear what Varoufakis was saying, was that we can't blame, for example, the way that the right is using mass media and new digital technologies. That should be a space that the left is always dominating. And if we're losing those spaces, we need to look in the mirror and say, okay, how do we win these? Because we can't be a group of people who are complaining of, oh, this new technology has now defeated us. I mean, we're the people of the future, supposedly.
Right. I think that's true. And I also think like there is some element of the right always has these massive advantages because capital is behind it and because, all of these, institutions are behind it. And then there's always the reality that like, there's this new poll that just came out from Brazil, and like we're already at the, Haddad lost by a significant margin. Now, if the vote took place today, they're tied. Most Brazilians don't like where the country's going. A number that should be higher, but frankly, given what they've done to Lula, it's still pretty high. I think like 48%, which is the most of any president, consider Lula the best president in Brazilian history. And this is like after a years-long lawfare media campaign and like a basically complete silencing of him as a political prisoner. So there is also just the element that like usually when these people come in power, they mostly do stuff that people don't like. And the paradox is always, that we have to deal with is that division of like, well, most normal people are going to hate getting rid of pensions as an example, but some normal people might like really vicious xenophobic policies. And that's like the sort of balance on the left project of building where there actually is like a mass majority to counter oligarchy and capital, and then other areas where we actually have to just like hold the moral line on things. Although I think actually in the United States, like I think, I think like rhetoric of open borders is frankly not helpful in the context of a presidential campaign. But I actually think there's a lot of room for talking about demilitarization and rights of people and things like that. And that is an area where actually somebody like Bernie should be really constructively pressured, because he does need to get better on that. But you can't get him better on that by acting like he's in charge of like a DSA reading group. You have to do it as he's running for president of the United States.
He was great on those issues in the 80s, specifically in like the Central American case.
Right. That's right. So he just needs, and I think actually as with foreign policy, he was pretty bad in 2016. And he kind of like, almost through talking about Kissinger, sort of like recreated that part of his politics, which again, they were pretty good in the 80s. He was talking about those things. He even talked about Palestinian human rights in the 80s.
And the accomplishments of Cuba.
And I was very clear about the accomplishments of Cuba. And that was one that he clearly never really wanted to walk away from. I like that was like, even at his most compromising, he was just like, oh, yeah, Castro was kind of mean, but I mean, come on. It was fucking cool. Give me a break. He had put by the way, Ronald Reagan tweeted me an amazing photo gallery of Fidel in Adidas tracksuits.
Yeah.
So Adidas might actually be the official brand of the show. Okay, let's do a little bit about Sudan. I'm laughing at Ahmadinejad apparently gave prop. You know what? Let's just do that. It's funny. So everybody knows that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, the former president of Iran, who I think we should always acknowledge was involved in suppressing the Green Uprising. And no, I do not think the Green Uprising was a CIA operation. I think it was a domestic civil rights movement in Iran. He obviously said things like gays don't exist in Iran. So let's, before we totally irony bro it, let's stipulate that Ahmadinejad has some very bad things on his record. On the other hand, Iran, although it violently suppressed the left post-revolution, has been at the paradox of it is not like Saudi Arabia. It also really does have a third world, not east, not west strain. And Ahmadinejad, in contrast to those other areas, to his credit, was actually very serious about building relationships with leaders like Chavez in particular in Latin America as part of a non-U.S. hegemonic order, which is correct. And if you study Iran, there's a huge amount of admiration for African-American culture in Iran. You have boulevards named after Malcolm X. And Ahmadinejad has already been very active tweeting in support of Colin Kaepernick. But I was a little surprised that he came out for Nipsey Hussle. I would recommend that everybody listen to the Woke Bros episode we did on Nipsey. And Nipsey, I mean, we'll certainly be playing them before we go live at the live show next Saturday. Nipsey was amazing. This is what Ahmadinejad tweeted. Was recently informed about the death of @Nipsey Hussle and was sad to hear about his death and 10 other people killed in Los Angeles. He's upping that estimate a little bit. How can one take someone's life so easily? Baby, don't cry. Gotta keep your head up. Even when the road is hard, never give up. Ahmadinejad is amazing on Twitter. Did you see he had the exchange with Virgil from Chapo?
Oh, yeah.
And Virgil tweeted him like, "Do you follow back, sir?" And Ahmadinejad was just like, "It depends. What do you typically tweet of, sir?" Like, it's like, in addition, he's just also like, he's both the most woke and the most friendly, civilized person on Twitter.
It's a good rebrand for him.
It's a great rebrand.
Oh yeah, who else did he cheer for? He tweeted about Michigan too during the college football, which I found very
Oh no, that was because a guy, like an intrepid guy, tweeted at him and was basically like, I think the guy asked him like, "Hey, could you like send some like positive?" Yeah, read the exchange. What did the guy say?
So
put it up. Can you put it up on screen?
Can you grab it, Matt?
I'm looking at it. Just go.
Yeah. Jesus Christ.
Mahmoud Ahmadinejad.
Says the NFL season will start this week. Unfortunately, once again, Kaepernick is not on an NFL roster, even though he is one of the best quarterbacks in the league.
Yeah,
Hashtag Colin Kaepernick. And then someone else tweets at him. He says, "We have much bigger problems here. Michigan is 8-8 in its last 16 games under Coach Jim. Go Blue. Also, college football is the only authentic football. Cordially, Fred. And then the response is, with a hard work ethic, inshallah, the U of M will return to its glory days.
That's so
Incredible.
awesome. That is just fucking beautiful. With a hard work ethic, inshallah, U of M will return to its glory days. Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. I mean, no doubt when he did his Lula's a political prisoner tweet, that really that did a lot of work. I had to remember the way Mousavi was put in prison in Iran. But this clip reminds us of what's happening in Sudan. I want to play this briefly, and then we'll go over it a little bit if we have it. So in the Sudan, a couple of days ago, Omar al-Bashir was arrested by the military. He's been in power for 30 years. And right before we get to this report, I think the very important thing about this is clearly there's a number of activists on the ground here who do not want an Egypt replay. The military has intervened. They've removed Omar al-Bashir. They've fired a spy chief who was involved in a lot of the violence and suppression. However, they are still officially in control, and this is not what a critical mass of people on the street wants. They don't want a replay of some of the dynamics of Egypt you saw in 2011, 12, and 13. This is a report from Al Jazeera.
In Sudan, a stunning turnaround as the new leader, General Abdel Fattah Burhan, struck a more conciliatory tone and promised inclusive efforts to establish a civilian government.
In order to provide an atmosphere for your desire to establish a state, we declare that the curfew be lifted. All detained under martial law will immediately be released. Human rights will be reinforced in line with international laws, the provincial rulers will be relieved of duty, and an invitation will be given to all the people, political parties, and organizations to engage in dialogue. A ceasefire will be enforced across the country, and we invite those carrying arms to lay them down, sit at the negotiation table, and agree to peaceful coexistence.
Moments earlier, a group of opposition leaders held a news conference and once again called for a civilian government.
The army, together with the people, have been victims to those people, cloaked as good, virtuous men. It is the duty and responsibility of the armed forces to protect the people and enforce the rule of law. The armed forces men who have fallen have done their best in ousting dictatorship and establishing a civil state. We and all the opposition parties refuse to hand over power to the military. We want a totally civil leadership.
Burhan assumed power on Friday when another general, Awad ibn Auf, the man who had orchestrated the end of President Omar al-Bashir's 30-year rule, resigned. After that announcement was made, there were celebrations on the streets. Many Sudanese hope that Burhan, who is the Inspector General of the military and perceived to be less tainted than either of his predecessors, may be able to bring solutions to the problems that led to months of protests.
So this is just, I think it's just also important to note, in addition to the situation there, two really important things. One, as Nasreen Malik, who writes for The Guardian's pointed out, she's a really good writer on this, that, you know, like in 2006, 7, and 8, Sudan was a very trendy, like George Clooney kind of topic, and people were very focused on things that were absolutely real, like the crimes of Omar al-Bashir and Darfur. At times overlooking some of the complexities of the politics, but no doubt he was a totally brutal leader and a dictator and someone who used ethnic and religious division, which have been actually overcome to some extent in this movement. But, you know, it is interesting that there's all that energy on the story of Sudan as an international human rights crisis and an Africa crisis and an ICC crisis and the typical narratives. But when Sudanese, in a primarily anti-austerity, that is the roots of this was driven by labor unions, and it was driven because of anger about rising food prices and things like value-added taxes. This was the movement that happened internally to depose Omar al-Bashir from power. And also Omar al-Bashir had sort of been... He was still wanted by the ICC, but some of the sort of rhetoric against him had cooled because he actually cooperated with the Europeans in a viciously anti-migrant stance. So all of these things loop together, and we need to see, you know, all of these places in and of themselves, and then also, be attuned to the movements inside them and not our sort of projections on them. And Sudan is a really good example of that. Guys, is Stephen Moore going to be at the Fed? Do we know? Stephen Moore is a really dumb guy who's known primarily for being a really dumb pundit. And I guess also like fleecing his ex-wife on some type of divorce settlement. But this video is coming around. This is him from a Michael Moore documentary. And I think, the theme of masks off continues. And I'm sure, this guy's a former editorial page Wall Street Journal guy. This is what all these people think. This is Chile. This is Milton Friedman going in and advising Pinochet on privatization while people are getting their stomachs cut open and they're thrown out of airplanes.
Capitalism is a lot more important than democracy. I'm not even a big believer in democracy. I always say that democracy can be two wolves and a sheep deciding on what to have for dinner.
This is Stephen Moore, no relation, a columnist and an editorial board member of the Wall Street Journal, the daily Bible of corporate America.
Now, look, I'm in favor of people having the right to vote and things like that. But, there are a lot of countries that have the right to vote that are still poor. Democracy doesn't always lead to a good economy or even a good political system. With capitalism, you are free to do what you want, to make whatever.
So there you have it. I think that's a very honest representation of how these people think. Incidentally, there's a lot of countries that have capitalism where a lot of people are very poor, including this one. Just as point of fact. Okay, guys, we got to do it. I've resisted it. We've got to talk about Pete. I still refuse to learn his name. But what is it? Buttigieg?
Buttigieg?
Buttigieg.
Buttigieg.
Oh, it is
Boot edge.
Buttigieg.
Boot edge edge.
Boot edge. Booty edge.
He has a big graphic that says boot edge edge.
Boot edge edge. Okay, so that is actually pretty simple. He's the flavor of the month in terms of kind of wanky political coverage. In the beginning, I was giving him a lot of props, frankly, just because he would be the first, openly gay president. That's cool. He said some good things. He also said some extremely disturbing things about Chelsea Manning. If you're concerned about issues like that, I trust everybody watching or listening to us is. But now, in his announcement speech, we get to, in some ways, the crux of the problem. And I'm going to read a little bit from Nathan Robinson, who, of course, did the ultimate and perfect takedown of boot edge in current affairs. But check this out.
When something is grotesque, it's hard to look away. And the horror show in Washington is mesmerizing. It's all-consuming. But starting today, we're going to change the channel.
That's Obama again. This is the same thing. And this is the fundamental divide right now in terms of argumentation. Do you want... Everybody agrees that we need to absolutely get rid of Trump. Anybody who would minimize that is either dumb or a bad faith actor. He needs to go, period. Full stop. And then there are those of us who want to get rid of Trump and the conditions that led to Trump and Trump-like things. And then there's others who want to get rid of Trump so we can watch HBO Go and not deal with any fundamental problems, and our environment will continue to be destroyed, and most lives will continue to be discarded and wasted. And the privileged among us can numb themselves out until the problems come to them, which they inevitably will. This is more Mayor Pete, on why he wants to be president.
Yeah. On the one hand, you definitely speak very progressively, but you don't have like a lot of super specific policy ideas.
Yeah, part of where the left and the center left have gone wrong is we've been so policy led that we haven't been as philosophical. We like to think of ourselves as the intellectual ones, but the truth is the right has done a better job in my lifetime of connecting up its philosophy and its values to its politics. Right now, I think we need to articulate the values, lay out our philosophical commitments, and then develop policies off of that. And I'm working very hard not to put the cart before the horse.
Is there time for that? You know, they want the list. They want to know exactly what you're going to do.
I think it can actually be a little bit dishonest to think you have it all figured out on day one. Look, I think anybody in this race or conversation is going to be a hell of a lot more specific and policy oriented than, say, the current president. But I don't think we ought to have that all kind of locked in on day one.
Policies are values. It's a value to say that every single person gets health care. It's a value to say that college is free. It's a value to guarantee jobs. It's a value to reclaim wealth from Amazon. It's a value to confront the global economic crisis. That's a value. What's stunning, though, is that he's talking about a micro moment, really just within the last couple of years, of people saying we actually need to get policy commitments, not rhetorical gestures, because this is the first time in our lifetimes that has even been put on the table. We've had politicians primarily in the Democratic Party who've articulated values and never been specific. In a second, we're going to get to the most important endorsement in the game, which has gone to our guy. But I just want to talk about a little bit from Nathan Robinson's piece, and there's many other aspects of this piece. But let's just get into, again, it's very revealing that this, we'll get to the policies second, of course would be a mayor who was an aggressive gentrifier. I'm quoting now from Robinson's piece. He wanted to turn South Bend into the quote-unquote Silicon Prairie. Jesus, that's so lame. And ignore the critical issues in the city. South Bend, African Americans make half of what South Bend whites make. They're twice as likely to be in liquid asset poverty as whites. Their unemployment rate is nearly twice as high. Eviction, this is all the results of his, as part of his, at the very least, what he did not confront. Eviction rates have been nearly 3 times the national average, a crisis among the worst in the country. Significant firings of municipal jobs in the name of efficiency. Buttigieg was prepared to eliminate jobs in part because, quote-unquote, robots led to lower injury rates, fewer injuries being predictable consequence of fewer jobs, right?
Hello.
Buttigieg ruthlessly's quantitative approach to municipal government led an acquaintance to compare him to Robert McNamara, which leads to another musing on the folly of well-intentioned planners, and also a good time to note the biographical note that he spent time at McKinsey, one of the most destructive consulting firms on the planet. So don't fall for the hype. And ironically, on one hand, we're treated to this whole like wankery of like, oh, he's so smart, and the kind of like shallow smart obsession. But then on the other hand, he's coming out and saying like, whoa, man, stop with the specifics. Now, in much more elevated news, when did this happen, Matt?
I believe this was just in the past few days.
It looks like Bernie's gotten the most coveted endorsement of 2020, certainly for the most coveted endorsement around this office. Check it out.
And now, obviously, you got a lot of attention talking about the government shutdown. Right now, if you could text Trump or Instagram him, what would you say to him?
I hate him. I just hate him. I don't even want to get political. You know what I'm saying? I have a court case.
Who are you supporting in 2020?
I don't know. You know, I'm going to always go with Bernie.
Yeah.
You know.
Why?
Because this is the thing, right? Bernie don't say things to be cool. Like, there's pictures of him being an activist from a very, very, very long time. So, as a matter of fact, I was watching the news and I saw like this guy named Tim Ryan, and his speech was very convincing to me. He really wants to give the United States free health care. So that's a big plus. We need health care. So, I don't know. We'll see.
She's awesome. But I just want to say it. To me, it's very revealing that she's pro Bernie, but then her olive branch to everybody else is like the most irrelevant person in the race.
Yeah. And
like it is kind of cool that she like skipped. Like she wasn't just like, no, and I also like what Cory Booker's saying. She was just like,
and it's also
and also there's this guy who's going to poll at less than 1% the whole time.
But then also ascribe to him the maximalist Medicare for all position.
Right, exactly. Just like, yes, let me just like give him props for actually having a great position on healthcare, which he might not have. She's so Machiavellian. And by the way, everybody whining about her drugging her clients should shut up.
Yeah.
Grow up.
Yeah. She's in the same category as Ilhan. Defend Cardi.
Defend hashtag Stan McCarty. Hashtag. All right, final question of the night. And I'm going to have to throw this up to everybody because this really is a theme now. Hey, Michael, going with the desperate pleads for Canadian coverage, the province of New Brunswick has had complete economic and media monopoly with the Irving Oil Company for decades, one of the richest families on earth. While the province is one of the poorest, plagued by ugly language politics, they have controlled the Liberal and Conservative parties, but now there's been a rising in other parties, and neighboring Prince Edward Island has elected its first Green Party government. Well, that's great. Okay, well, it sounds like you just did our coverage for us, guys. I mean, what are we gonna do? We gonna do more Canadian coverage? I don't know. Sure.
I don't feel like we've been lacking on Canadian.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I actually think, relatively speaking, we've done some Canadian coverage.
If you think we haven't done Canadian coverage, it means you're not a patron, probably.
Boom. All right, guys. Tuesday, Richard Wolff is joining us. I want to thank, of course, each and every one of you. Matt, David, Forrest, Artesia, Vic. You gonna come hang out with us more?
Yeah, totally, man. Thanks
Man, it's exciting with these videos. They're gonna be incredible. Appreciate you all. See you soon.